Welcome to Part 8 in Northern Perspective's review of Justin Trudeau's Top 10 Scandals. Beginning in February of 2019, Trudeau faced arguably the biggest political crisis of his premiership at the time as allegations surfaced that members of his staff had improperly pressed Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was Attorney General and Justice Minister, to take actions to halt the prosecution of SNC Lavalin, a huge Quebec-based construction and engineering company. In 2015, the firm had been charged with corruption and fraud stemming from allegations that it had used bribery to win contracts from the Libyan government during the regime of Muammar al-Gaddafi. A change to the Canadian Criminal Code promulgated in September 2018 established plea bargain-like deferred prosecution agreements that allowed corporations facing prosecution to enter into remediation agreements under which they could forestall prosecution by paying fines and taking steps to redress previous wrongdoing. SNC Lavalin had applied to negotiate a DPA even before the legislation that changed the criminal code had been enacted, and the firm had been turned down by the Public Prosecution Service. Conviction threatened SNC Lavalin with the possibility of being banned from competing for government contracts, a potentially catastrophic consequence for the huge company, which provided thousands of jobs for Canadian workers. On February 7, 2019, the Globe and Mail newspaper reported that Trudeau aides had tried to pressure Wilson-Raybould into interceding in the SNC Lavalin matter, and that her refusal to do so had played a major role in her reassignment in January as Veterans Affairs Minister as part of a cabinet reshuffle. Trudeau claimed that there had been no improprieties and that in his own discussion with Wilson-Raybould about the prosecution of SNC Lavalin, he had left the decision on the matter to her discretion.
The allegations in the Globe story this morning are false. Neither the current nor the previous Attorney General was ever directed by me or by anyone in my office to take a decision in this matter.
Having resigned from the cabinet on February 12th, Wilson-Raybould told the House of Commons Justice Committee on February 27th that there had been a consistent and sustained effort to pressure her to intervene to obtain a DPA for SNC Lavalin.
For a period of approximately 4 months between September and December of 2018, I experienced a consistent and sustained effort by many people within the government to seek to politically interfere in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion in my role as the Attorney General of Canada in an inappropriate effort to secure a deferred prosecution agreement with SNC Lavalin. These events involved 11 people, excluding myself and my political staff, from the Prime Minister's office, the Privy Council office, and the Office of the Minister of Finance.
She also testified that she had received veiled threats related to the matter from the Prime Minister's office, the Privy Council office, and the Finance Minister's office. Among those whom Wilson-Raybould said had sought to unduly influence her were Clerk of the Privy Council Michael Wernick and Trudeau's close friend and Principal Secretary Gerald Butts, who had resigned on February 18th. When Butts testified before the Justice Committee on March 6th, he said that he had interpreted his conversations with Wilson-Raybould very differently from the way that she had characterized them.
All we ever asked the Attorney General to do was to consider a second opinion.
The second opinion would come from a retired Supreme Court justice. Wilson-Raybould says this was pitched to her multiple times, even after she said no.
In my view, the communications and efforts to change my mind on this matter should have stopped.
And he denied that her refusal to intercede in the prosecution of SNC Lavalin had prompted her change of cabinet portfolio.
So the plan was a simple one, Mr. Chair. Philpott to Treasury Board, Wilson-Raybould to Indigenous Services, bring Lametti into Justice, and Jordan into the new Rural Affairs portfolio that caucus had been lobbying for. It was a simple plan for a small, tidy shuffle. The situation started to change on the weekend of January 5th. The Prime Minister spoke to Minister Philpott in person, one-on-one, in his office on Sunday the 6th. The Prime Minister debriefed us right afterward. He said Minister Philpott was excited by the challenge, especially the digital government aspects of her new file. She said Minister Wilson-Raybould was an excellent choice for Indigenous services, but worried she would see it as a demotion. Minister Philpott then told the Prime Minister that she worried that Minister Wilson-Raybould might wonder if her move were connected to the DPA issue. That was the first time I ever heard anyone suggest that this cabinet shuffle was in any way related to the SNC Lavalin file. The Prime Minister assured Minister Philpott that the shuffle had nothing to do with the file and asked her if she would help with the transition of her ministry to Minister Wilson-Raybould.
2 days earlier, Jane Philpott, the Treasury Board President and one of the most respected members of Trudeau's cabinet, resigned her post, saying, "Sadly, I have lost confidence in how the government has dealt with this matter and in how it has responded to the issues raised," an indication that Trudeau's integrity was being increasingly questioned by members of his own party.
Philpott's resignation letter makes it clear that she is quitting over the SNC Lavalin controversy. "Sadly, I have lost confidence in how the government has dealt with this matter and in how it has responded to the issues raised. There can be a cost to acting on one's principles, but there is a bigger cost to abandoning them." Philpott and Wilson-Raybould are close friends and political allies. Philpott tweeted her support when Wilson-Raybould quit cabinet. Wilson-Raybould returned the favor when news of Philpott's departure broke.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer had already called on Trudeau to resign.
Jane Philpott's resignation from cabinet clearly demonstrates a government in total chaos, led by a disgraced Prime Minister, consumed with scandal and focused only on his political survival.
Following parliamentary testimony by Butts, Wernick, and the Deputy Justice Minister, Nathalie Drouin, on March 7th, Trudeau, whose public approval rating had dipped considerably in recent opinion polling, held a press conference in which he attributed the controversy to an erosion of trust between Butts and Wilson-Raybould and to a general breakdown in communication. Short of issuing an apology to Wilson-Raybould, the Prime Minister explained that he had asked members of his staff to raise the matter of the SNC Lavalin prosecution with Wilson-Raybould and to emphasize the potential ramifications of her decision on the matter, but that, in hindsight, he should have engaged with her personally. Trudeau acknowledged that he had not been aware of the erosion of trust and that it was his responsibility to have been so. He also raised the possibility of separating the positions of Attorney General and Justice Minister to remove the political dimension from the former. In August, the affair returned to the headlines and further damaged Trudeau's reputation when a 58-page report issued by Canadian Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion found that Trudeau and his staff had indeed pressured Wilson-Raybould to intervene in the SNC Lavalin case, thus violating Canada's conflict of interest law for public office holders.
The scathing report about the conduct of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Canada's Ethics Commissioner has found the Prime Minister violated the Conflict of Interest Act and that he did seek to improperly influence then Attorney General and Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould to intervene in a criminal prosecution case involving SNC Lavalin. It's what Wilson-Raybould, once a star in Trudeau's cabinet, has said from the beginning. Now the Ethics Commissioner confirms it, writing, "The authority of the Prime Minister and his office was used to circumvent, undermine, and ultimately attempt to discredit the decision of the Director of Public Prosecutions, as well as the authority of Ms. Wilson-Raybould as the Crown's Chief Law Officer." After the allegations first emerged in February, Wilson-Raybould became a thorn in the side of the Prime Minister and eventually quit his cabinet. She accused him and 10 others from his inner circle of a consistent and sustained effort to interfere in whether to give SNC a deferred prosecution agreement. That way, the big Quebec firm could avoid a criminal prosecution on serious corruption and fraud charges.
It noted that Trudeau had flagrantly attempted to influence Wilson-Raybould in the matter both, quote, directly and indirectly, end quote. Responding to the report, Trudeau said, quote, "I take responsibility for the mistakes I have made," end quote. But he did not apologize for his actions, claiming that they had been taken to prevent the loss of Canadian jobs that would result from legal action against SNC Lavalin.
We recognize that the way this happened shouldn't have happened. I take responsibility for the mistakes that I made.